This is the Coltrata Pro Model board, and I've got one big complaint about this board, and it's that it's pretty flexy. It's an 8-ply maple with Formica on top. To my knowledge, Formica is not a great like engineering material, but Madrid, the full circle distribution, you know, the Huntington Beach factory where Prism, Madrid, Valhalla is made, they put it on just about all of their boards, so they're confident that it's doing something. Not enough for my taste. This board, you know, it's got a lot of reasons for why it would be flexy. It's got the deep flush mounts, it's got deep cuts in the wheel wells, it's got these notable like rails here that, you know, they're cool design. I'm sure it helped sell some boards. It's a cool callback to a lot of the, you know, early grabs that Coltrata is known for doing in his videos, but they're not functional for me. And this board is just a little too flexy for my taste. So we're gonna be installing some carbon fiber on this board, and the first step in that is unfortunately sanding off this graphic. Made myself a little sanding block. We're gonna get to work. $232 times 0.08. Okay. Slightly less than we needed, unfortunately. Maybe I shouldn't have used the whole bottle the first one. It's a lesson learned. But we're only 4 grams off. We're only a couple percent. Toothbrush and a drill. Do I plug the holes, or we can re-drill them later? Oh shit, I think I do. We ball. There are the wheel wells, that's right. Ooh, it's coming up through. That's so fun. There's too much epoxy in there. This is the one I wanted to do first. I did them slightly out of order. I don't recommend using your hands for this. I probably shouldn't be. You might have an epoxy soup here. I'd wager I've put too much on already. Cover sheet of plastic. It's our release sheet. This is where we use a credit card to spread it all the way to the edges. This next step's important so the vacuum bag can actually get out all of its air. Just put a breather fabric over it. When the vacuum bag compresses, the air still has this. Why are you licking me like crazy? What? What's your deal? I should have read the directions maybe. I don't actually know what I'm doing. Pretty awesome. Seems like that'll do the trick. An update here. The vacuum bag is not perfectly sealed. I haven't figured out where it is, like where the issue area is, but it is a little bit of a bummer. Granted, I think it's fine. You know, I think the vacuum seal part of it is really most critical just for the first like hour or so when it sets. You know, while that epoxy is starting to take place, it's about getting it pressed tight, getting voids out, things like that. So I don't think it's going to impact our overall strength, the fact that this failed, but I am still able to use this little pump to get more suction, and it holds it for a while. So there's a little relief in that it's not a total failure. We can still do our thing, but a little bummer. Maybe don't buy the cheapest vacuum bags on Amazon if you're gonna do this.
Did it not work?
No, it worked, but it's all lumpy. All right, here is our first look at the board. The only processing I've done so far is literally just taking scissors and trimming the sides. There's still a lot of work to be done getting those ready. A lot of these like wrinkles that you see, these hills and valleys, with the exception of some voids, there's some voids here and there. I so far believe that all this wrinkling is actually just epoxy, and so that if I take a coarse sanding material and really flatten this out and then, you know, polish it up, this may actually have a really nice surface. One step I regret not taking is plugging the mounting holes. By the time I realized I should have done that, the epoxy was already curing. I had already mixed it, and doing that step would have taken too long and the epoxy would no longer have been ready. So I think I can drill straight holes. Actually, a lot of the mounting holes didn't even fill with epoxy, so they should be easy to still drill through. All right, here's another quick update. We did a whole lot of sanding off camera. Used a really coarse sandpaper and started knocking down a lot of these mountains and valleys. We're not all the way done with sanding yet, of course. I haven't used any finer grit sandpapers, and from the pattern you can tell that it's not perfectly level, but a lot of my suspicion so far has been true, that the epoxy mountains and valleys that we've been seeing are actually just epoxy and not carbon fiber, although there are a couple patches. So circle there, circle there, circle there, circle there, and there was one right here where I noticed a little bit of a texture change in the epoxy. So on this one I took a finer grit sandpaper, really polished it, and took a little water to like make it shiny and feel, and I think I may have penetrated some of the carbon fiber layer, as in there was a wrinkle in the carbon fiber that came up in that epoxy. So I might actually have to be done sanding this. If I sand deeper, we might be structurally compromising this board. All right, now's the hard part where we evaluate if this was all worth it. You know, this is a review channel. You guys gotta learn something from this experience, and boy, howdy, do I tell you,
I learned some stuff. I learned to leave it up to the professionals and to not do this ever again. I had fun, don't get me wrong. I enjoyed myself, and I'm really pleased with the final product. This is a board that I love to skate now. I was never really sold with or in love with the Trada Pro model, but now I'm feeling extremely dialed on this board. Locking down that torsional flex has had some great handling improvements on this board, and you'll just have to take my anecdotal evidence that I'm doing some of the best toe sides of my life, and I think the toe side slide is really indicative of how much flex you have in your setup. So it did its job. It didn't do it perfectly. You know, there's still some torsional flex that I wish would have locked down a little more, and maybe with a little bit more clever engineering or maybe better handling of the material, better preparation, I could have achieved that. One thing that comes to mind is just using carbon fiber in some of the other axes. Right now, the carbon fiber only goes up and down the board and side to side, the carbon fiber strands, that is. Had I endeavored to do some diagonal strands or use like a triaxial type of blend, I don't know how common that is or how expensive that is, but that maybe could have given me the performance benefits that I'm looking for. Either way, let's talk about how much I spent. I spent well over $100, maybe around $130 getting this board to the finished state that it is in now. And I did this shit as cheap as possible. Now there are a couple things that, a couple expenses that I had that maybe you wouldn't. So do keep that in mind as I list these off. Some of these I remember the price for, some of them I don't, so it'll be a little wishy-washy here, but I know that I spent about $60 on the carbon fiber and the epoxy kit. It was from eBay. It was 5 foot long by 1 foot wide, which you saw me cut in half and double up on for just the added torsional flex where I needed it, or the added resistance to it. I spent about $13 on a rotary cutter that allowed me to cut the carbon fiber really cleanly without releasing any microscopic carbon fiber strands into the air. Carbon fiber is a very, just dangerous material to handle and to, well, not so much to handle, it's dangerous to process. It's dangerous to cut. You don't want to make it airborne. You don't want to breathe it in. That's why you saw me be so careful with the vacuum and the respirator, which was an added cost. The Dremel tools, the cutting pieces that I used to trim this were, some other about $20 expense, and you wanted to use the right kind of cutting tool to minimize the amount of dust being put off into the air. I spent about $20 on a vacuum bag, and I should have spent more because that vacuum bag failed pretty quickly. So I should have bought from a more expensive, more reputable brand, like I presume Hefty. I think Hefty has good bags. I had to use a bunch of old t-shirts. I had to use a bunch of sandpaper. Those were materials that I already had, but if you don't have that type of thing for a breather fabric or for your final sanding and stuff like that, keep that in mind. And all the sanding that I did on this board was by hand, so I highly recommend using electric tools if you have the means to. I don't. I'm a college kid doing all of this on my front porch and my living room with little access to tools and stuff like that. I'm slowly collecting it as I go along, but I couldn't justify buying a bunch of stuff that I could have otherwise done by hand. What else? Grip tape is a possible expense. You got to consider that you might mess up your grip tape in this process if you're not careful, and so you'll end up replacing some of it. Fortunately, I was pretty careful, didn't have to replace it, but got close to. So all of that expense, all of that hours and hours of work just for a marginal improvement in my slides, and a finished product that looks pretty cool, but this was a cover-up job. The paint pens that I bought to do this cover-up job is $25, but it was something that I wanted to do and deemed that in order to ride and enjoy this board I had to do, so there's another expense in there. I suggest you leave it up to the professionals, the people who have the materials already, the people who have the know-how and the equipment to handle and cut this stuff safely. It was a really small improvement that I spent a lot of money on, and if you think about it, that $130 or more that I spent getting this into the condition it is now could have been put towards a new board, right? That can almost pay for another Trotta. Had I sold this deck and put $130 towards a new deck, then maybe I could have one of the fancy rocket boards that are extremely expensive but well made, very stiff. Or I could have gone with a Zenit custom and got like a custom marble 38, which would have been incredibly comparable to this deck. Yeah, there's a lot of other ways to go about it, and I don't regret doing this. I think I learned a lot. I think I've got a final product that makes me happy, but I cannot possibly recommend it to another person, and this is not a process I'll ever go through again in the future. Not unless somehow I get into doing composites work and have access to a lot of equipment to do this the right way. But as a college student working with limited materials, stay away from this. I hope you enjoy the video. I hope, this answered your questions. If you've done this yourself and you've got a different conclusion than me, if you have done this yourself and enjoy the benefits or not noticed any improvement, all these things that differ from my opinion, I want to hear it. This channel is not just an echo chamber for people reverberating my own opinions. If you have stuff that clashes with my final analysis, I think it's valuable that you include it so that other people trying to do their research have all the resources available to them as possible. I thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.